to have joined us at the Tacoma Uniting Church. But before I get into any of the business, any of the stuff of today, any of the meat and matter, I'd like to have an acknowledgement of country, which we'd always pause to do in this space at this time. But I'd like to welcome Emmy, a local woman, but also local First Nation voice, who's also going to be running our kids stuff. Emmy, I'd love to invite you to do our acknowledgement this morning.
Easy. Good morning, everyone. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. I would like to recognise their ongoing connection to community, culture, the waterways and the land. And given that we're coming into NAIDOC week, I would also like to acknowledge their ongoing presence here, their ability to always stand with the theme of get up, stand up and show up. They've been doing that for generations now, and they continue to do it going forward, keeping their culture strong on the land that is theirs. Thank you.
Thank you. Would also like to offer a special welcome, the welcome that you would have walked through, each and every one of you who saw our banner. What did we walk under? What did we walk through? A sign that read Womanjika. Womanjika, a word many of us are familiar with, but part of my learning as a member of the second peoples of this land, I'm really indebted to Mandy Nicholson, who's a Wurundjeri Willem woman, who offered me the education that Womanjika is not just welcome, is not hello and g'day, as often in our kind of English vernacular we have kind of a hey, hello, welcome kind of an idea. Womanjika, when broken down, is woman come, is digi, I'm asking you to come, and then ka, purpose. So her offering to me, and part of my learning, is Womanjika. It's not just welcome, it is an invitation to come with purpose, an intent. I love that. She'd say it's an invitation to come to now a culturally safe space. In offering that invitation and in receiving that invitation, we are coming with the intention to hear each other, to be safe, to be there for each other. So Womanjika, may you hear that word we see and read, may you hear and receive it differently. I would like to offer that welcome, that invitation to come with intent to all of you. I'd also like to welcome Glenn Loughrey, who we're going to hear a lot more from. Glenn, you're our special guest today. I hope that's not news to you. We're going to have a conversation with Glenn, which we're really looking forward to both during this service and then in an event a little bit later this afternoon. So welcome. It's great to have you in our midst. It's great to have you in our midst. We've also got others who are here but not here, and that is through the lens of the camera. For those of you joining us at home through Zoom, another welcome, a virtual welcome, and may you feel as present here as those who are gathered physically. I want to offer you a story that I stumbled over recently to help frame our gathering this morning. I recently encountered this story of a Spanish woman on her way to New Mexico, to Chamao, and she saw, as she walked, as she wandered, two Spanish farmers who'd climbed down the banks of this river and were lifting and moving and nudging rocks and stones in a dry riverbed. These farmers were repositioning these stones because they'd been moved and disrupted through flooding at times, but also through drought, through storm and drought. And what these farmers had noticed is the rocks were now disrupting and disabling the flow of this river. So this woman, so touched by this moment, went down into the riverbed and joined them. She spoke of having this sense of the work that these two farmers were doing was a work that they, their grandparents, their great-grandparents had done as farmers for generations, moving these stones whenever they inhibited the flow of this river. It's a really touching story because it's this story, it's the story of what we do as we gather here as a group of spiritual seekers, as Jesus followers, as people of faith, we come to move stones. We come to move the stones and rocks, any rocks and stones in our own lives and hearts and minds that block and deny the flow of life and love. We gather here to join that ancient work of moving stones and rocks between us, that which creates boundaries and borders and denies the flow of life and love between us. And we come to commit to and to rejoin the ancient work of naming, calling out and helping to nudge and move any stones in our society, in our wider world, that denies and blocks the flow of life. So welcome this morning as we again join the work of, in whatever way, small and large, we can take a rock and move it and thus allow the flow of life and love, of peace and justice, of understanding and compassion to flow all the more, that all might receive life and dignity, respect, inclusion, autonomy, and feel free to flourish into who they are created to be. So thank you for coming and joining the ancient work. I'm about to light our Christ candle, something we would do each and every time we gather here. Ignite a little flame. It's a reminder of the Christ light in each and every one of us, but also a reminder of the ever important work of rock moving, of joining Jesus in the unblocking and reconciling and reuniting of each other to each other. So let its presence be a reminder of the work that is happening here as we open ourselves to each other, as we listen with intent, and as we share our lives together. Will you join me in prayer? As we pause in silence, let us ground ourselves in the seats that we're in, feeling the weight of our bodies at this time and in this place. I invite you to take 3 deep, mindful breaths, anchoring yourself here and to the land on which you stand. Let us become aware of the breath of the air we breathe together as one. And let us become aware of the breath of life breathing us. Spirit of love, experienced as the very ground of our being, ground us now. Open us to learn. Help us to hear anew that which is hard to hear. Help us to see that which we often miss. And help us to learn the way of love and live with courage in rejoining the work of moving any and every rock that denies the flow of your life and love. In Jesus we pray. Amen. Let me hand you over to Dee.
So, I have a little bit of a confession that I have a bit of a trouble with the word belief. Because belief requires you to know something. Whereas the word welcome doesn't require you to know really anything about the other person, or God, or what you think is God. So, Matt asked me to do this song, which I wrote a while ago for us all to sing. And it's about truly being welcome in this place, as I feel welcome in this place. So if we can sing it together. Sit or stand as you feel appropriately welcomed.
Accepted here without condition, within the sweet love. I'm welcome here. I feel accepted here without condition, within sweet love. Light in me, resurrected with hope. The light in you, it feels like hope. Verse 2, we are welcome. We are welcome here. We are accepted without condition. It's all about you. We are welcome here. We are accepted here without rejection. With all of our strength, light in me. Resurrected with hope. Light in you feels like home. The light in me. The light in me resurrected with hope. Light feels like home. All welcome here. Without exception, no celebration. We celebrate you. All welcome here.
Thank you, Dee, and for all of you for affirming that prayer, for embodying that prayer as we gather this morning. Part of our ritual of gathering in this space is to have a kids' talk, which we call our Young at Heart segment, so we don't deny anyone on the basis of age. But of course, we've got a guest speaker who's going to offer us a kid's story before our kids are going to go out and do their own kind of kids activity that we hope to then see the results of later in the service. We're going to have a bit of show and tell at the end, but before the kids go out, Emmy's got a special book for us. So the book's going to be on the screen for those who aren't privileged enough to be able to bend down and see the physical book. But Emmy, if you could come forward now, we're going to hear your story.
Oh yeah, that's working. So the book's called Fair Skinned Blackfella, and I'm actually really glad that your service picked this. I did say this earlier, because I actually bought this book for my oldest child. Once upon a dream time, on a red and dusty cattle station, there lived a young girl named Mary. Now, Mary was what the white people called half-caste. Her mother was black and her father was white. Mary was a lonely girl because the other children who lived on the station would always tease her. Her only friend was her next-door neighbour, Old Ned. Old Ned was one of the community elders, and he was respected by everyone. People listened when he spoke because his words were full of knowledge and wisdom. One day, Mary sat and watched the two girls dancing by the river. They were new to the station, so she decided to be brave and ask if she could play with them. "Hi, my name's Mary. What's yours?" she asked. Neither of the girls seemed very friendly, but one replied, "I'm Nellie, and this is Lana. What do you want?" "I just want to play," stuttered Mary. Lana laughed. "We don't play with half-caste," she said. As she turned and walked away, Mary said quietly, "But I'm Koori too." "You're not Koori. You're not like us. Your skin is light, ours is dark. Your hair is straight and fair, ours is curly and black," cried Nellie. Mary kind of looks a little bit like me. Mary could feel the tears swell in her eyes. In her heart, she knew she was Aboriginal, and she didn't understand why Nellie and Lana could not see this. From behind the girls, they heard a voice call out, "Hey, you mob, come over here." They turned around to find Old Ned sitting on the ground under the gum tree. The girls knew they had to respect him, and so they went over and sat down. It doesn't matter if you're black fella or white fella, it is how you feel in your heart and soul which is important. We're all brothers and sisters in this life. No matter what colour we are, you should cherish each other and bring our culture and beliefs into the future. Keep our spirit alive, said Old Ned. Colour is a state of mind, girls. Mary is just a fair-skinned black fella. There was an awkward silence as the girls sat and stared at each other. At last, Nellie turned to Mary and said, "We're sorry, Mary. Old Ned is right. You are a black fella, just like us." We're all standing together now. The three girls jumped up. "Come on, Mary, let's go play," called Lana as her friend Nellie went to run off. "Thanks, Ned," whispered Mary, and she wrapped her arms around him and gave him a big hug. The trees swayed lightly in the breeze, and the girls played until the silver moon looked down on the dusty red earth. And that's all.
Thank you, Emmy. Now I'm going to send you out with Emmy, who's a First Nations educator and the kindergarten that Bo attends, is lucky enough to have Emmy do some work in those parts and other parts. So you guys have a real treat this morning. You're going to do a bit of work outside in the meeting room. So have fun. We'll see you on the other side when you create a beautiful offering. So Emmy, we entrust them to you with great confidence. Off you go. A couple of quick announcements as our kids find their way out. And that is, of course, a reminder of what happens not only in this space, but after this space. We've got a great day planned. When at 12 o'clock, we've got a smoking ceremony by Stacey Nico Piper. She's going to be here, and we get to participate in that acknowledgement of country and smoking ceremony. So that's at 12 o'clock. And then at 1 o'clock, Glenn's going to return. We're getting, squeezing every inch out of him we can while he's with us. And we're going to have another kind of Q&A workshop kind of experience, and vocalist choir featuring. So it's going to be fantastic. If you haven't yet got a ticket, Shakti, there's still tickets available. There are? Good one. So see Shakti at the table after the service just to register and make sure you've got a ticket for that afternoon. We won't charge you for this section of the service, of course, but that's a $10 just to cover proceedings costs. For today's gathering, we're going to, after this service, because there's a few more of us kicking around today, we have morning tea after the service. You'd be encouraged and welcome to stay. We're going to serve it in the hall. So to do that, you need to go out those doors, round the corner, and there's a large space there in which we can space out a little bit more and be served tea and coffee. So make sure you hang around for that and be mindful of time. At 12 o'clock, you'll hear when we're moving on to the next aspect, and that is the smoking ceremony that will move us into the next space. Community news, a few little bits and pieces happening amongst our mob, our little tribe here. Wary of Faye Webster, I think, who might be joining us right now, whose daughter Rachel and Neil have COVID, and so Faye lives on that property with them, and so they're managing that, and of course that means we're mindful of Faye as well and the wider family, and so please be mindful, prayerful of Faye. We've had a few others who have just come off the back of COVID, and others I'm sure we're not aware of that are doing the same. So amongst this crazy flu season, amongst all the stuff that's flying around, let's continue to keep each other safe, but also reach out to each other, make some calls, check in on how people are doing, and continue to show love to each other. Marilyn Mangold's got laryngitis, which has been her kind of, run-down system on the back of her week, so we're mindful of her. Mark Barry, how are you doing?
All right.
Good. Had some carpal tunnel surgery during the week, did you not? Oh, there you go. Mark will be having some carpal tunnel surgery, so I was very impressed you were here with us, seeing you here, Mark. So it's not that I'm not now impressed, but I'm less impressed. But yeah, all the best for surgery. It's great that you'll be moving towards a bit more of a pain-free future. But yeah, we're mindful as you go through that experience. Is there anything else any others would like to highlight?
Birthday.
Shakti, you had a birthday last week. Happy birthday. Well done. Well done, you got there. Yes, I did have a birthday. I followed you again, Shakti. I thought that's a really good idea. I'll jump on the back of that. So, yes, and we're mindful too of our whole community and the Lantern Parade that we underwent as a community up here on the weekend, the great celebration of this neighbourhood and this tribe. What a wonderful event. So full of joy, and we were in the parade, and the amount of smiles and encouragement and great lantern, just that wonderful winter vibe was just a fantastic celebration of who we are up in the hills and our little unique patch of the woods. So, any other things you'd like to highlight amidst our community that's worth noting or others being aware of? Di.
Yeah, so Joy and I will be getting together a couple of women's lunches and dinners over the next 6 weeks.
Excellent.
We'll get the dates out on that.
Excellent. So some women's gatherings. Of course, very open, very wide church, those gatherings. So speak to Di or Joy if you'd be up for gathering with other women around these parts. Fantastic. Anything else before we move you on? Jonathan.
There's acknowledgement signs starting to go up
Yeah.
around villages, and we've started to have some requests from private shop owners
Cool.
who would like one for their shop, and so they'd be available if people are interested. They can contact myself or Shakti.
Fantastic. So for those that didn't hear, welcome signs, acknowledgement signs, that the township groups of this area, but also the Hills Walking Together group have been really oxygenating and encouraging. So that's great news that other vendors and traders are wanting to acknowledge the traditional owners of these lands in that way. So great work, you crew. We're going to move on to some fun business, a part of these proceedings. We're going to hear from Glenn Loughrey. So I'm going to encourage Glenn to come up. I'm going to give him a mic. I'm going to come and join you. And we're going to hear from you just a little bit, Glenn, just initially about who you are, because you've wandered into these parts, and I don't know you from a bar of soap, so I want to know what the go is. Glenn is an Anglican minister out in Glen Iris. This won't be news to you, but you were the first canon of the St Paul's Cathedral, which is fantastic. You're also author, writer, husband, father, cat owner, or pet owner.
Pet owner.
Pet
okay.
owner, sorry.
Dog owner.
Dog owner. So, Glenn, give us an overarcher. What we're about to do is hear a bit from you. We're going to have a bit of reflection time, and we're going to ask Glenn some questions. And Glenn's going to answer whatever we throw at him, which is fun and exciting. But I wanted to give you a bit of a teaser first. You don't know what you're getting yourselves into, so let's give us a précis, give us an overview of who you are, what you do, your life, and on the back of that, we're going to throw some questions at you. Who are you? Go.
Thank you very much, Matt. Darurinya Badu Arajri Yaranadi Glen Loughrey Yaradu Marang. What I've just said in my language is I'm proud to be Wiradjuri. My name is Glen Loughrey, and good day, which is different to Womanjika. Yaradu Marang means good day. How you going? What you doing? I'm Wiradjuri embedded by birth, Australian for the purposes of management and control, and Anglican because I had no other choice. Those kind of things can pick up my story. I also want, as a visiting Wiradjuri person on Wurundjeri country, to acknowledge the country that I'm on, to acknowledge that this country was never ceded. It remains and continues to be the land of the Wurundjeri people, and I acknowledge that their elders have been very, very faithful as continuing custodians of this space and have managed it for many, many centuries, are managing it now, and will manage it until the rest of us aren't here anymore. So we acknowledge their elders, but we do have to acknowledge the fact that this land was stolen, and those that pinched it have no intention of giving it back anytime soon. Just so that you get a little bit of a story about me, I'm one of those pale-skinned Aboriginals, and we might want to talk about that later, what it's like to be the wrong colour in the wrong skin. But I grew up in New South Wales, Wiradjuri country, up near a place, north of a place called Mudgee, and my family were non-identifying Aboriginal people right up until I began to identify, and that's because my father's mother, her father was, as far as we can gather, but there are two Aboriginal men who may have been my grandmother's father, and one was the local black tracker, James McDonald, Tracker McDonald, or Jimmy Governor. People here who may be old enough to remember the movie Chant of Jimmy Blacksmith. My research suggests that he was my great-grandfather, so don't leave anything sharp around later today. I always throw that in as a joke. It's a bad joke. My wife says it's a bad joke. So it was this story that my uncles and aunts were told not to tell anybody about my grandmother's true identity. So in a sense, our family lived for many years with the idea that we had to be the whitest people in the community, we had to be well behaved, we had to be well dressed. My mother made sure that we were the epitome of whiteness. She was English, and my father's father was Irish, so he referred to us as Black Irish, and that's who I am. Growing up in school, I remember my father was always called black fella, or darky, or I was black fella's young fella, or young black fella, or darky's young fella, or a young darky, whichever way. A bit confusing, but it all meant the same thing. I thought I was just that because my father was dark-skinned for being in the sun all the time, but that wasn't the truth. And as I went through high school, it became more and more obvious that A, I was an outsider, and B, that there was something about my heritage that separated me from everybody else. And a friend reminded me one night by saying, "You're just the son of a drunk bush black." And that was the kind of process, massive bullying and all of those things went along with being in that. You have to remember Mudgee, where I was going to school, between 1825 and 1876, every local tribal Aboriginal had been exterminated. William Cox, who built the road over the mountain, said in 1825, when there'd been an incident down near Rylstone, we have to exterminate these. The only solution is to exterminate this vermin, and that includes women and children. And when you talk to, and I talk to some of my friends who talk about their great-grandfather and their grandfathers talking about hunting trips, they weren't chasing rabbits. And even when I grew up, you weren't allowed to leave your water bottle anywhere that anybody else could get to it. You weren't allowed to drink out of anybody else's water bottle. And my father kept talking about poisoned water, poisoned flour and all of those things, and that was in the 60s. I was born in 55, 12 years before 1967. In 1967, my father thought that was a pretty good time to go and ask for a bank loan to buy a farm, and was told bluntly by the bank manager, and I was in the room, "We don't lend to people like you, black fella." And he walked across the road to the pub, and that changed our life forever. So that's my background, I became, I've done lots of things. It's taken a long time to work through the process of getting to being comfortable in my skin now, and I'm very comfortable in my skin, and I don't care what anybody thinks about my colour, and I don't care what anybody thinks about my heritage. Bad luck, get used to it. I'm here, I'm old, and I'm grumpy, and that's the way it's going to be. But it's important to work through those processes about how we got to this place. I spent my life growing up inside the church. I said I became an Anglican because I had no other choice. When I started running around the bush with very little on and no shoes, I realised I was connected to something that was greater and bigger and more important than me. But because we weren't allowed to talk about it in Aboriginal terms, the only place I could do it was inside the church. And being an Anglican priest is the widest thing a blackfella could do. If you're going to assimilate, you might as well have the Queen as your boss. And that's been a process of working through that relationship and recognising. I kind of say it is that God in the end, Jesus was at an international spiritual conference in the sky, and a couple of the elders were there, and Jesus says, "Do you know that bloke Loughrey?" And the elder said, "Yeah, he's one of us." And then Jesus said, "Well, he's with us at the moment." And the elder said, "Yeah, you keep him until he's ready to come back, and then we'll have him then." And I think that's the kind of place where I'm at, and I move in and out of that space all the time. And it's been a long journey of working through that. So I was a salvo for a long time, and I was a drunk for a long time. And not being able to deal with the shame and everything that goes on. I look back at my father and could see that his behaviour came out of that deep shame of not being able to be who he was and be taken seriously. I had to work through that. Then I came back into the Anglican Church, and I have to say the Anglican Church has saved me a couple of times. For that I'm grateful. And I've worked in the Navy, I've worked as school chaplain. I'm an artist, and it's really great familiar to see Amanda's work up on the wall, because she's up in our art gallery in Glen Iris at the moment. I'm an artist, and I'm doing a lot of things now. I'm busier now than I ever was. I used to say to the kids at school, "Don't peak at school. If you peak at school, you've got nowhere to go." All right? You can't go anywhere else. I'm peaking a 67 1/4, bought a Harley Davidson. I'm on 5 boards, I'm working for universities, suddenly people are talking to me, but it's taken 67 and a bit years to get to here. Did that answer any of your questions?
Oh, terrific. That is a fantastic little entry point. Thank you for your courage to come and just open up your story to us. and to do what we're about to do now, and that's to further invite some questions, some curiosities, and perhaps use the lens that we offered at the start of the service around some of these rocks to inquire about what's prevented you and other First Nations peoples from receiving life and love and agency and sovereignty. So Shakti and Jonathan are going to hand out some bits of paper and some pens, and what we want to do is have your questions. So if you could write them down and even reflect on what questions you'd like to ask Glenn. What are the gaps and barriers to your understanding and knowledge? This is a wonderful and unique opportunity to sit at the feet of Glenn, to hear a voice not yours, and try and hear what you need to hear. So use this opportunity to consider those questions you'd most like to ask. It'll help you move forward as a journey as First and Second Peoples. So I'm going to play a song. Shakti, what's the name of this artist? I totally meant to write it down. I totally neglected. Ash Dargan, who... Yes, and very local, and he's granted permission for us to play some of his lovely music that'll just be in the background as you jot your questions down. Then we're going to gather them up and then ask them of Glenn for the second part of this service. So let's do that now, and we'll regather. So perhaps if you've finished your question, hold it in the air. You might have Shakti and Jonathan might come around and grab it off you. Final moments to frame that question. This one here, Shakti or Jonathan. That's right. Glenn's starting to do the maths on how much time he's got to offer. It's such a good exercise to think of our questions. We so much more easily go to our opinions and answers our own thoughts, but to go to our questions, that's actually what leads us forward. So we're going to welcome Glenn back up here. I might flick over to the next slide. But just before we do that, we're just going to hear a text. Di, if you could read a text for us this morning, then we're going to hear from Glenn.
Just before I give the Bible reading, I just empathise with Glenn. Two of my children, when they were born, my twins, were quite dark, and my ex-husband has black curly hair. And I asked my mother-in-law, I said, is there Italian or Greek in your family? She said, oh no, we're Spanish. And it transpired later that my ex-husband's grandfather was, an Indigenous man, So we're not Spanish after all. Matthew 5, verses 1 to 12. This is not the Monty Python version, it's a revised version. Sorry, don't think about the cheesemakers. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up to the mountain, and after he sat down, the disciples said to him, his disciples came to him, and he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those people when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." Thanks be to God.
Whew, just a few questions. Shouldn't be here too long. Thanks, Glenn. Glenn, do you want to kick us off? You wanted to offer something, and then I'm going to fire some questions.
Just before we have the questions, and I would say if there's a lot of questions here that we don't actually get to, I'm happy to take them away, write them down, give answers and provide those back, or actually do a Zoomie at some point of time to deal with them. Quite happy to do that. We did an acknowledgement of country when we came in, and Matt was talking about the importance of Womanjeka as a word that means you're welcome here if you come with positive intention. And I invite you to come if you have positive intention. What we forget about acknowledgement of countries and welcome to countries is that they're two parts of a legally binding contract. If we acknowledge that we're on somebody's land and we come onto that land, we agree to come onto that land under the rules, under the laws, under the traditions of the people we're coming on, whose land we're coming onto. Because that's what it means when we say we acknowledge the continuing custodians. We acknowledge not just that they are the continuing custodians, but everything about them we will acknowledge as well, their traditions and practices. We will live in tune with those traditions and practices. The welcome, if you get one, and it's not guaranteed, okay? It's not guaranteed that you get a welcome, but if they genuinely feel that you are coming with a positive intention, they will welcome it and say, you're a part of our place. You're here now. You're one with us. You can share in what, and as the Wurundjeri people say, from the top of the trees to the bottom of the roots, everything here is available to you. But if you seek to live with positive intention and if you do not at some stage acknowledge us, in other words, you go off and do your own thing, maybe you're not welcome. And that's a very strong discussion, and a thing that we need to take in mind when we do acknowledgements and welcomes. They're not just protocols. Okay? They are things that we really have to take seriously because there could be consequences. There are places on my country where I would never do a welcome because people have come along and dug great big holes in it, 3 coal mines, and ripped out all the guts of our land. Do you think I feel that they should be welcome? Maybe not. So I don't get asked to do too many of those.
Glenn, we'll start at the top, work
Okay.
our way through. First question I plucked out was, how does Dreamtime mesh with present spirituality, your First Nation spirituality? How mesh with your current Christian faith?
Oh, okay. Dreamtime, you know, it's really, that's a Western terminology for what we would probably describe as the every when. The fact that everything that has been, is and will be is here now. Dreamtime isn't a long distant past because we don't think in those terms. Dreamtime isn't about something that happened like creation in our Christian scriptures that we say happened at a certain time. Dreamtime is an ongoing interaction with the sense of who we are on our land and our place and our time. It is our fully connection to what is here, what it has been, what it will be, and it's all here now. We don't have this idea of things being passed from us. We understand that is everybody that has been is here. Everybody that is here. Everybody that will be is here. So Dreamtime isn't this sense of some ethereal past that holds a certain set of knowledges. The stories we tell and are called Dreamtime stories are still active stories. They're still real stories in the moment that we're in. So to ask me how does that mesh with my Christianity, in a sense it does hit with what we would call Kairos time. The time of God is here now and everything's here with us. We talk about the cloud of witnesses that are around us. It's the same kind of sense in some way. We're not looking and living. It does connect. I mean, I don't look as an Aboriginal who is a Christian. I don't look for a future. I look for a present. And I look for everything that's in this moment. I'm not yearning to be away from it because in every sense this is everything. Okay? Does that make sense to the person who asked the question?
It's not a bad start. Glenn's also a bit of a scholar in Thomas Merton, so the contemplative aspect of Christianity. So another avenue people might wish to explore with Glenn later. A question, what is The Voice? Well, I can answer that one. Television show, Channel 7. So next...
Good, thanks, well done.
So it says,
Okay.
what is The Voice? A building, a group of people, a network, a process. This we talk about enshrining a voice in Parliament. What is The Voice? What does that mean? Yeah.
If you don't have a voice, you don't exist. It's a very simple statement. If you don't have a voice, you don't exist. If you don't have a voice as a mob, individuals will have a voice for you. And their voice may not be the voice of the people itself. Okay? Mob, there is no I in mob. So when we need to think about voice, it's about getting a process for the overall understanding of Aboriginal people to be heard on, and I always smile at this because the politicians say it's a voice so that we can have a say on things that matter to us. They still haven't caught up to the fact that this is still our land. So everything that happens matters to us. So we have a voice on all things, not just on Aboriginal stuff. This is still our land. Part of the voice will be obviously a representative group of people that have the opportunity to speak on behalf of Aboriginal people, or as I call ourselves, the people before Cook and Phillip. Because you have to understand there were no Aboriginals, no blackfellas, no Indigenous, no First Nation peoples before Cook and Phillip. The Warani Wiradjuri, Boonwurrung, Yorta Yorta, Wiradjuri. We weren't a mob together. That's the words that were given to us so we could be all grouped together and treated the same, and we're not. So voice will be, and I may talk about this later this afternoon, the connection between the voice and then treaty, then truth-telling, and then walking with a limp, Makarrata. Once we hook those together, you'll see the importance of having a body that is able to articulate what is needed, what the story is, and be able to guide and lead the unsettled. I don't call the people who came here second as settlers, because yet you're very unsettled. You're uncomfortable with being in this place. So to lead the unsettled into a more positive understanding and change their worldviews to be with us. So it's not just about legislation as well, although it's very important. It's about how do we get people to see differently. One of the things that's really important, if you're going to learn language, that will help you to understand how I think. Okay?
Glenn, there's a lot of questions. Another one here. From your perspective, have attitudes changed? Are they changing?
Oh, that's a big one. Short answer, no, I don't think so. I don't think things have changed. Outside of very small groups, I mean, this is obviously a group that's attitude has changed. But you're an exception to the rule, not the rule. Constantly. Can you pull your arm sleeve up, please, Matt?
Try.
This one here. I can get on. This is still significantly the experience of Aboriginal people today, which is, by golly, I could be Aboriginal because my skin colour isn't right. And people, and I get that from clergy probably on a regular basis. I get the attitude that I still have to get up and tell my story, take my clothes off in public and show my scars. I still have to educate, and I'm 2% of the population, and I have to educate 98%. We still provide jobs for social workers because we're 44% of the people who are taken away from children. We're 6% of that population. We fund private jails because we're 33% of the jail population is Aboriginal. We still have to explain ourselves through the voice of a white person. People have to tell our story because we're not capable of telling it ourselves. Particularly here in the southeastern side of Australia, I don't think attitudes have changed sufficiently, and that's why I have great concerns about a referendum.
Glenn, what can I or we do? In fact, this one was where was it? So many good questions. What can we do to support our First Peoples in our local community?
And again, I'll be touching on this afternoon. I mean, obviously what you do here, when I walked in here today, there were a whole lot of symbols that reminded me of culture, and those symbols then said to me, these people have actually recognised that we are here. And that's an important and great thing to do. And you need to be doing those kind of gentle things, making spaces that are appropriate for us to be a part of, and not being a part of because you want us to appropriate it, or not being a part of it because you want to appropriate us, because you have a nice Aboriginal friend. I get that all the time. Oh, I've got this nice Aboriginal man that I know, and I go, we're not here to be like that. It's got to be more than that, and it's got to be real. This is real kind of stuff that you can do. The big issue that you have to do, we all have to do, it's not just you, we all have to do, is unpack the coloniality in our mindset and our thinking. Australia was built on racism and slavery and a colonial mindset. That sits underneath everything we have. If we own property or we inherited money that came from our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, where did that money come from? How did it get here? How do we get our privilege today? How do we live out of that, and how do we change our privilege and our entitlement? It's a process, and there's a little booklet we'll hand out this afternoon for parishes to sit, and churches or small groups to sit and work through individually and as a group complicity in the overall package of coloniality and modernity, and how we have destituted the original owners. There's two things you need to do. De-link from that, find ways to separate from that, and that even includes the hierarchy of the Uniting Church or the hierarchy of the Anglican Church, which still remains terribly colonial. My wife was reading this morning about Rwanda and how it remains connected to European governance and policies. What happened to Africa and what happened in Australia is that we undeveloped the local practice, knowledge, systems. We have oral stories of scientific knowledge, agricultural knowledge that was understood in this country way before European scientists even got out of bed. And yet that was all undeveloped, taken away. So how do we do that ourselves? How do we unpack that? Doing the things that you're doing here are a good way to start. This is excellent. But we also need to have those more harder conversations about, how do I really think? Why do I think like that? And what does it mean when I think like that? You've got no idea how many people act raciously in how they speak to me on a daily basis. And most of them don't really understand what they've just said. And we have to help people to unpack that. Okay? Watermingolo says coloniality is not over, it's all over. We're all affected. And we as Aboriginal people are affected by it because we have to speak your language, which changes the way we think. And then we begin to think like you. There's a lot of things we have to work through in those processes. How many more questions have you got there?
Probably only got time for one. So what I'm going to do is...
talking too much, am I?
You are talking beautifully, and everything you're saying is helpful to hear. So, and you're also answering some that I'm like, oh, shove that one out. So thank you. How about I read a few and give you a chance to respond to what you'd like to as a final one?
Okay.
And then, of course, as you said, there'll be other chances today to speak with Glenn, to hear more from Glenn in the afternoon, and the fact that you'd even be willing to do some engagement in a Zoom conversation, that's a fantastic invitation. And so there'll be other avenues.
Okay.
So some of the questions are, what can I or we do to support the Victorian Government's Voice Treaty Truth initiative, and perhaps even some of those wider movements around treaty, which we're hearing a lot about? How long do I have to feel sorry? How long do I have to wait for forgiveness? Glenn, how do you see the searching out to each other happening as we learn to walk together? So many. What would you most like to see change today to help heal the wounds of history? What can everyday people do? And how is it you personally deal with rejection or prejudice? And the final one was, what have been the biggest factors in breaking down the shame you felt regarding your own identity?
I'll answer the last question first.
Okay.
Art. Art's been vital in that process. I paint large paintings, 6-foot paintings, with a kebab skewer. It's the ultimate in isolation, meditation and contemplation. And it's a conversation. It's fantastic. The first two that you asked me, one was about the Victorian Treaty, etc. I think one of the things we have to be very careful of, and I understand why states are doing treaties because nothing was happening at a federal level, but the reality is that we're a federation under a constitution that was set for the whole of our country. Any treaty should be done at a national level, because that gives us a constitutional reason so that we can keep people accountable. If we do treaties at state levels, one of the risks we run is there is no one to keep people accountable for those treaties. Although we have developed a independent body in Victoria, and hopefully that will begin to do some of that work. So we have to be careful about doing treaties at a local level. My wish would be to have a treaty, a voice and a treaty enshrined in the Constitution, so that all states and others have to act according to that process, and there is someone to keep people accountable. Because there are so many different people before Cook and Phillip nations in this country, or groups, you're going to have to rework those treaties on a mob-by-mob basis, because we're all very different. We just can't do Victorian Aboriginal people, because what's important to Wurundjeri may not be as important to Bunurong. There may be other things that need to be addressed there, and they need to be attached into that. So there's a whole process of thinking that through. I think one of the things is, when we get the chance to have a referendum, keep lobbying your local people about the need to have the voice and the treaty locked in the Constitution. It has to be constitutional. It can't be just a voice to Parliament. So keep lobbying to make sure that that happens, and when you get the opportunity, rope in all your friends and make them vote in the right way. Because, talk about the importance. For up until now, Australia is not a true existence. If Australia was invaded illegally, as it was, then everything that's been built since is illegal. There is a sense in which Lydia Thorpe is correct. And until we resolve that sense of sovereignty, no matter what we do is always going to be fraught with failure at some point. So we've got to think all those things through. They're a bigger issue than just simply getting the statement of the heart through, and we have to get the whole of the statement of the heart through, not just voice or treaty, because it comes as a package. And the other question that came after that was?
Yeah, name it. Which one?
The second one after that.
Anybody
remember what it was?
How long do we have to wait till we feel sorry? I thought that was the one.
Yeah.
How long do you have to wait to feel sorry? Don't feel sorry. Don't feel sorry. Sorry and guilt. No good. No good. Don't go nowhere. Don't make no difference. Don't feel sorry. Educate. Activate. Get involved. Speak. Come to grips with what... See, reconciliation is not for our black fellas. We are not to do reconciliation because we didn't do anything wrong. You have to reconcile inside yourself who you are in this space, and once you've done that, help us to move the story forward. So don't feel sorry. I've run out of boxes of tissues. We want you to activate and get involved. Okay?
Glenn, thank you so much. I also take the encouragement you offered during the week when we were talking about treaty, and you said, think about the local elders who are going to be the 2% trying to speak against the 98% trying to agitate and oxygenate. Think of, you were encouraging me to say, find out your local elders and give them all the support, because imagine the 2% trying to move the big boulder. So we've got to be advocates and a voice for it.
And what Matt's just saying is right. We've already seen it started to happen in Canberra in the last few days as a result of something that happened on the project. People are starting to splinter up into, and it's going to be, when we get to a referendum for Aboriginal people, really difficult time, because the voices are going to be against us, and we're a very small group of people. And our elders are under huge pressure under any time. And this is going to really be tough for them. So your wonderful elders in this area will need you to stand there and say, we are with you. What do you want us to do? What do you want us to do? So that we can support you while you're speaking into this very difficult place. They're going to need you all the way. It's important.
Thank you, Glenn. Richard, I'm going to hand over to you.
You'll hear the, are we on? Yep. You'll hear the refrain for this instrumentally, and then you'll hear it sung once, and then the next time you hear it sung, you'll be singing it. So it's after 4, last line of the refrain is the intro. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll do that again. We missed the cue there. We'll do that again. 1, 2, 3, 4. From the many strands, many colours woven into one. God be praised through our working hands, many colours woven into one. Together, with one heart from the many strands, many colours woven into one. God be praised through our working hands, many colours woven into. Weave us as corrupt none. Weave our gifts and talents. Weave our dreams and visions. One heart from the many strands, many colours woven into one. God be praised through our working hands, many colours woven into hands that work for justice, hands that show your mercy, of love and welcome. With one heart from the many strands, many colours woven into one. God be praised through our working hands, many colours, hands that show your gospel, hands that bring your healing, hands of faith and courage. With one heart from the many strands, many colours woven into one. God be praised through our working hands, many colours woven into one. Many colours woven into one. Many colours woven into one.
Okay, no. Time for some reflection before we finish the service. We've heard so much. Thank you, Glenn. Take time to bring your mind back. It's probably gone all over the place. Bring it back from its wanderings. Be present. And use your breath to link you to this moment, this ever when. Breathe in and breathe out. Bring your focus to the word Aboriginal. Ask, what does this word mean to me? What arises within me? Do I have some hidden or unconscious bias that I hold? Seek in the shadows. Go on a mission. What can I find in me? Ponder, reflect, breathe. And you might find some surprises. Do these things I think or believe stop me from flowing with compassion and understanding? Do I feel separate? Do I feel superior? Would I like to move these potential blockages to make way for a richer understanding of First Nations culture and wisdom? And ask, finally, what gets in my way? How can I move these rocks and stones? What can I shift so that I become a better ally? We created a river here with lots of blockages, and I'd like you to imagine that you're moving some of those blockages right now so that the love can flow and we can weave together and walk together as one. So you may want to come and move some stones later when you have time, but for now, just imagine, what rocks do you want to move inside you?
Thank you, Shakti. I'm going to close our service now. We're about to hear from our kids and get a bit of a show and tell. And I'll just leave you with the encouragement and something I deeply value as Jesus followers, as people within the Christian tradition. It's that wonderful dual movement Jesus always takes us on. It's always in and out. And I love the movement Jesus invites of moving to the poor, the voiceless, the oppressed. That's where he's focused. That's where he shone the light. Who's missing out? Who's not getting, who's not heard, who's not seen, who's not included? Jesus also asked that question because his vitriol, his anger, his frustration was at those with privilege and power. The attention would often turn to, why are people missing out? As Jesus' followers, as those within the Christian tradition, we are people of privilege and power. We need to both move towards the margins, to offer care, compassion and understanding to those missing out, not heard, oppressed and squashed. But we must also undergo the willingness to undergo the microscope, to ask the questions, how am I complicit with oppression? How do I buy into the colonial mentality? How do I perpetuate a narrative that blocks the flow of life and love? Jesus walks with us to the margins, but also invites reflection on how we are contributing to those who are missing out. So may we do both together. Allow me to offer you this word of prayer as a prayer of healing for First and Second Peoples, and then we'll close our service. Spirit of love, we who have come from every land give thanks for Australia, this earth that feeds us, the shores that bind us, the skies that envelope us in freedom. We stand together, united as one people, proud of our ability to work together, grateful for our gifts, nourished by our diversity and our harmony. And yet, we turn to the original peoples of this land, and we see too what we have taken. We weep for loss of freedom, of country, of children, even of life itself. We stand in awe at their survival and in debt for their land. We have shadows in our history which, if not faced, diminish us. We have taken without asking. Our nation has taken without asking. Lives are wounded. We see the pain, we feel the sorrow, and we seek forgiveness. Let us look back with courage, see the truth, and speak it. Let us look around with compassion and see the cost and bear it. Let us look forward with hope, see what we can be and create it. Give us courage to face the truth, compassion to share the burden, strength to play our part in the healing, and hope to walk forward to a place of justice. With courage, compassion, strength and hope, we will walk together on the journey of healing. May it be so. Amen. Kids, I want to see what you've been up to. Before we close our service, who's up for doing a bit of a show and tell? Very quickly, Sylvia, come up. Flynn, you come up. I would love to see what's going on. Olive, you've all done such wonderful things. Glenn, can I grab that off? What have you been doing, Sylvie?
Well, this one, I sort of copied what Vida did, but I made like a thing to remind me what all of the symbols are.
All the symbols, man. That's fantastic. Olive, have you done the same? Flynn? Oh, on the back. Oh, you've written something. Have you made a sentence or something? Oh, you've shown all the symbols. Fantastic. Flynn, what have you done?
Well, I've sort of done the same thing, but it's so it's basically a story. So there's the kangaroo trying to hide behind the sand hill to get away from the boomerangs and the spears. And here is a campsite with the people, and here's a kangaroo running away from the people which are digging, and here's the sun and another sand dune.
Fantastic. And what have you done here?
So it's just all the things I like.
All the things you like. Salt and sugar. They're the only two things I can see on there. Only two things you need. Simple pleasures. Good work, crew. A little taste. Thank you, Emmy, for leading that experience with our kids, our intergenerational experience. Allow me to send you out with a blessing. Remembering that the fun is just beginning. Morning tea to gather, to share story, to connect. And then, of course, 12 o'clock, we've got a smoking ceremony. Shakti?
I have just received a message from Stacey who has tested.
Oh, no! There you go. Stacey, who was to lead our smoking ceremony, has just tested positive to COVID. So there will be some weavings and wanderings and changes, but no doubt we will still find a way to make... Yes, there's artwork uncovering the other things, and just a little bit of time with Glenn so we can grill him with our questions. So, you know, a way has been paved to actually get to Glenn. So, yes, Glenn says, thank you, Stacey. There you go. So thoughts with Stacey and prayers for her. Yeah, no good at all. And she would have loved to have been here and offer that special thing. Oh, what a time we're in, folks. Let me offer you this blessing. Go with us, Creator in all that builds community. Go with us, Christ, in all that breaks down barriers. And go with us, Spirit, in all that reconciles. And from Auntie Betty Pike, Aboriginal elder, till next time, may you always stand tall as a gum tree, be as strong as the rock Uluru, as gentle and still as the morning mist. Hold the warmth of campfire in your heart, and may the Creator Spirit always walk with you. Amen. Thank you for joining us this morning, and a special bit of a round of applause to thank Glenn for his participation this morning. Do you want to sing us out? Yeah.
Well, I think we have to stand now. We've sat quite long enough, so let's stand. Intro is third line of the refrain after two parts. 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3.
Richard, just as you start that, I forgot to take up the offering. So I'm just going to walk around with the offering bowls as we're doing our final song, just to enable the work of this place to continue here in this space and to the wider community. So yes, if you haven't come prepared to give, fine, no stresses, don't feel guilt, but bowls will be distributed during our closing song. Thank you, Jeff, that I'll get paid this week. That's fantastic.
One more, and I hit my nose.
We're going to trust you again. They're going to trust you, and all this kind of stuff.